Good evening, everyone. Welcome to National Black Researchers Week. This week was organized by the Association of Black Researchers as a way to connect Black researchers to resources. At the end of this session, we will announce the winner of our giveaway. Leonore is going to be on hand managing our chat and tech issues. I'm going to first start by asking our panelists to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Miss Amber Brown.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Amber Brown. I am a current PhD student at LSU School of Education and a faculty member at LSU Health New Orleans School of Public Health.
Thank you, Amber. Up next, we've got Dr. Callie Edwards.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Callie Edwards. I am the Acting Director of Program Evaluation and Education Research at the Friday Institute for Educational Innovation. I also serve as an adjunct faculty member in the College of Education at NC State, focusing on qualitative research methods. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Jamila Davis.
Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. My name is Jamila Davis, and I currently work at UNC Chapel Hill in the School of Education. I have the pleasure of leading an undergraduate program in Human and Organizational Leadership Development, also known as HOLD. I serve as the program director for that, and then also as a clinical assistant professor teaching a lot of courses on leadership.
Fantastic, thank you. And finally, I'm your moderator for this evening, Nikita Boston Fisher. I am a researcher, public health professional, and the host of a podcast called The Good Health Cafe. Our first question is, what constitutes education research? Ms. Brown.
Education research can really, it's really an umbrella term in my opinion. And I say that because you can take education and apply it to any aspect of interest that you may have or any field that you're interested in, because every field's foundation is education. You have to be educated to understand what the work that you're doing, to apply that to research, and to practice anything that you're doing. So whenever I think of education research, I think of it as an umbrella term for any kind of research that you're doing.
Thank you. Dr. Edwards?
That was an excellent response. And just to kind of build off of that about what I think of when I think of education research, I really think of, learning and being so central to everything that we do. Learning can look differently and be in different contexts. So for instance, thinking about who is a learner, of course, it could be someone in a college or university or a school, but it could also be an employee. It could also be a parent. It could also be a caregiver, right? And so anytime that we want to study learning, that's what I think of when I think of education research. It doesn't just have to happen, like Ms. Brown said, in the field of education, but as long as you're trying to understand learning, you're doing educational research.
Thank you. Dr. Davis, anything to add?
Yeah, I want to call attention to kind of the term research, right? So much of what both my colleagues mentioned, when I think about the research piece, I think about at the core of that is asking the questions about the systemic impact of fill in the blank, which I agree with my colleagues in saying that this can, that education can be learning, it can be whatever context you might be in. So that's something I think about.
Thank you. Our next question is, could you please describe your journey as a Black researcher in education and particularly highlight any challenges or successes? And we're going to go in the same order always. So first up, Ms. Brown.
So I actually started out on public health. That's my background. And I got into education after working in a school. And I really understood the importance of learning the foundation of education as a whole, because again, I think that that's everything builds off of that. So the more that you know about education, the better you can practice it, whether you're teaching, you're a student, or you're even doing that research as well. So that's why I transitioned into education for my PhD. Also, too, what I find is really interesting is that we have a lot of educators at the the grade school level who are practicing and who are women and men of color, but we don't necessarily see that in the higher education field. We don't see a lot of administrators, a lot of professors, a lot of researchers who look like the students that they're serving. So that was also really a big push for me to go into education as well. I've definitely had some challenges with balancing life and being a PhD student. I started my program in 2018, and all these things happened, obviously, with the pandemic. I lost a family member in that, and I really had a lot to learn about myself, but also really learn to say no and learn what barriers or boundaries are, and applying those boundaries, and also just becoming okay with taking time to really enjoy this journey, because sometimes I look at it and when I started, I thought, okay, this is a race. I'm racing against this 4-year mark. Maybe I'll get done in 3, but I love that saying, we make plans and God laughs, because things happen. And it really helped me to take a step back and understand the importance of looking at time and understanding that time is going to pass. But over the course of time, what is it that you're going to say that you're going to have in X amount of time? So whether that's 3, 4, or 7 years, at the end of that mark, at least I'll be coming out with a PhD versus going home and saying, well, these years have passed, but I didn't put any energy or any effort into bettering myself. Maybe I just went home and watched reruns of TV shows, but at least I can say, no matter how long the journey is, at least I've accomplished something at the end.
Thank you. Go on, Dr. Edwards.
Awesome. Well, we have a lot in common, Ms. Brown, because I also started in public health. My master's is in public health. But back to that, so your question was around like our journey, right, as a Black researcher. So I'll take you all back to undergrad, right? So when I was an undergraduate student at UNC Chapel Hill, I was someone who ran from research. I was like, I don't want any parts of it. I don't want to be in a master's thesis or an undergraduate thesis. I don't want to take a research class, because I thought it only meant one thing. I didn't really have a comprehensive understanding of what research could be and how I could study topics that I truly cared about. I thought research just looked like, a white male in a lab coat. Like literally that was like my conception of what research was. So my journey really started as someone who was running from research, and kind of how I found it and ended up falling in love with it was in my master's program, where I was working at Student Health Services, and really wanted to use data to answer questions. I really had a lot of questions about how we could better serve students, and how we could meet the needs of students and reach more students. And how I figured that out was collecting data and analyzing data, and really asking students what they needed. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. I would like to do something like this for my career. And then it kind of grew from there. I got more experience in assessment, evaluation, and research methods. So my journey really started as someone who thought research was only, it only looked one way, and it only included one group of people, or could only include one type of topic. And it grew to be something that I can use these tools really to answer the questions I want to know, to advocate for the people who I want to advocate for, to be an activist in my own way, right? To say, oh, students need this, and this is why. So it grew over time. I would say some of the challenges I've had as a researcher, one is really kind of finding community, like finding a place that, I am so excited. We kind of talked before this panel started about just being glad to be in this space, right? With people who look like you and people who may have similar lived experiences than you, because usually I'm in rooms where I might be the only person who looks like me or has a background such as myself. So I'm a first generation college student, and there's lots of things that kind of come with that. So I say that's a challenge, but also it's been also an opportunity. I've met a lot of people, and just like the panelists here on the call, where I have found community, but it's been a growing process over time. And so before I make this a monologue, I'll pause it there. So my challenge and strength was kind of finding community.
Thank you, Dr. Davis.
Such great insight. It's always so important to hear each other's stories, because I think there are nooks and crannies of each of our stories that might resonate with us, validate where we are in our own journey, but then also kind of open the door to, wow, there are so many different ways to get to being, calling yourself a researcher, and also, identifying as Black and what that intersectionality looks like. So glad that this was a question that was asked. So unlike the other folks, I started off in education. I was born to a dad who was really committed to college opportunity programs. So I feel like my whole life I've been on a college campus, had access to that, and didn't realize, when you're young and you're kind of rebellious, you just don't want to do anything your parents do. So I was like, I'm not going to be a teacher. I'm not going to get into education. That's like my parents' jam. And really discovered just a love and an ease and a natural affinity towards education specifically. It's in undergraduate, in my undergraduate career, I looked for ways to, what are the opportunities I can take advantage of that get me closer to maybe even working on a college campus? What does that look like? And sometimes I was on task forces, or I was on I was in leadership positions as a resident assistant. So that really led me into my my interest in my first love of student affairs, and really looking at the world through a practitioner's eyes. How are we going to support students' holistic development on campus, and get them to success? And by success, meaning, earning that degree that they have set their eyes on from the beginning, to open doors that, that they would be able to accomplish even more goals in the future. Along the way, is where I would say in my graduate program, I started realizing that, I got a lot of questions. And those questions started following me in my practitioner role. And I noticed that, when I saw things happen on campus or in our community, that I would become the person known to have a healthy sense of criticism, is one of the best compliments I would say I would have received, and always asking some really tough questions. And at the time, I didn't name it as research or budding research questions, but in the community that I had across practitioners who had then taken the leap and really spent some time diving deep into cultivating their research ability, I recognized that, wow, wait, maybe I am a researcher. Maybe these questions I'm asking aren't just things that I'm like, ooh, have you ever wondered why? And really something that I wanted to explore more. So that motivated me to go back to school, and go to my doctoral program. And I brought the questions with me. And those questions still linger. I'm still asking, what's happening in the room where decisions are made that significantly impact our students of color, our Black and Brown students, our students who are consistently underrepresented and under-supported across our college campuses. So that's really the journey that it took. And, those challenges, emerge of course, that imposter syndrome, not realizing, oh, these questions I'm asking, I can actually study them. Not knowing that, because although I had access to what a college campus looked like, it had never been named for me as research. And it ties into kind of, this one challenge I wanted to highlight is just the fact that there are times where your identities walk into a room before you do. And those identities that walk in are filled with assumptions in the room that are ahead of you. And for me, it's not only being a Black researcher, but it's also being a Black woman, and also a mother of a young child, and thinking about what that sets up for people, and thinking of the assumptions that they have and how I'm going to present myself into a meeting, and oftentimes feeling like I have to prove myself before I get the assumptions even wiped away. So that's definitely a challenge that I've struggled with. and continue to, even in new spaces. But at the same time, I think it's something that, people have mentioned before, that a community is a deal breaker there. So reasons why I say yes to events like this is because, yes, we need to validate each other in these moments, because there are many times where we oftentimes feel alone. So in a snapshot, that would be kind of my journey to being a Black researcher.
Thank you all for sharing your great stories and journeys.
Can I
If
add
you,
something, Nikita?
yes,
So I kind of missed the question a little bit. I'm feeling some imposter syndrome coming before these amazing doctors. So I don't think I really answered the question, but so to answer the question directly for me, how I fell into research, it actually was interesting. Just being in the setting, like I mentioned, and not seeing a lot of people who look like me in faculty roles. That's it sparked my interest, but I've always enjoyed reading and I like to write, which as a researcher, you have to like to read and you have to like to write. So that just really worked for me. But anecdotally, just having conversations with students who were looking and craving to have a connection with a mentor who was Black, that was really where this anecdotal collection started. And I am a qualitative researcher. And so really just being able to narrate those stories is how I just kind of dove into research, because it really gives me an opportunity to say, okay, let me take all these stories and all these conversations and put it down and find these trends and see what's going on and what can we do to give the give a voice to those students who aren't really heard because they're washed out by the dominant student group that's on campus. Or how do we find solutions to some of the issues that they have, and again, just giving them a voice. So that's really what pushed me to get into research and enjoy it and look at the student experience, which I'm so passionate about, because far more often than not, students go through those 4 years. And as a first generation college student, I totally know what it's like to just go through 4 years and kind of put your head down, turn the paper in when you need to turn it in, not really even asking the questions whenever I had them, because I didn't think that it was appropriate or I felt intimidated. And I still struggle with that a lot now, having that imposter syndrome. But understanding the importance of having that voice and using it. And research is a great way to do that and not necessarily have to confront anybody, because you're writing all of this on paper and then you're disseminating this out, and so many other people who are having these experiences can learn from that research as well, and some changes can come to fruition from that.
thank you so much for adding that. That was very helpful. If you had to do this all over again, or you could give someone advice who is interested in, education research, what would you tell them?
I'm going to let Dr. Edwards or Dr. Davis go before me, please, as you already have.
No worries at all. I'll go ahead and take a stab at this question because it definitely builds off of what you just mentioned, future Dr. Brown. But when you were talking about imposter syndrome, I can totally relate because I experienced that all throughout, I would say, my educational experience, but particularly in my doctoral program. I was someone who did my undergrad, master's, and PhD in a sequential back-to-back, no gaps type of way, because I had a scholarship that funded it. But because of that, a lot of, as Dr. Davis mentioned, a lot of assumptions about my identities and about my capabilities and about, should I be here? Did they make the right choice by admitting me? Am I a researcher? Can I do this work? All those questions came to bear. And particularly, I remember one advisor in my graduate experience, I'll leave it broad, one of my advisors that I had did pretty poorly on one of our first tests in a course. And I had mentioned to this advisor that I wanted to get a PhD and I wanted to be a researcher, et cetera. And they were like, well, if you're going to be a researcher, you're really going to need to, know this topic. And, they basically are very negative and very doubtful of my abilities. And that did not help my imposter syndrome at all. So I kind of used that moment to, when things like that happen, you can do multiple things, right? I could have took that and said, well, maybe they're right, and just not move forward with it. Or I could use it as like, okay, I'm used to as motivation to like prove them wrong. And that was kind of that was the path that I took. So to go back to the question, the advice I would give someone is to not internalize those messages that you may be receiving from society, from naysayers, from people who don't believe in your abilities, people who may make assumptions about you based on your background, like, oh, you're not supposed to be here, because yes, you are, and yes, you have what it takes to be there. And I did write an article, I'll put it in the chat, about my journey overcoming imposter syndrome, because it was a process and it's something that I continually work through. But I think that if I could give one person advice starting the research journey, is to get ahead of that monster, because they can eat you alive, right? And so that would be what I would suggest to folks that are interested in becoming a Black researcher or being a Black researcher. Don't let your imposter syndrome prevent the greatness that you already have within you.
Awesome. Thank you. Go on, Dr. Davis.
Yeah, it's such wise words from my scholar sister over there. But one of the other things I'm thinking about is how we let, and it kind of points to a little bit about what Dr. Edwards just mentioned, how others perceive us. And I think that and even more importantly, I'll speak about my experience. Sometimes for me, doing research, especially around race, the loudest critics in my head, as well as the ones I pay attention to, are the people in my community. There's so much to read, there's so much to learn, even as a Black researcher who is focused on the experiences of Black students, undergraduate students, even Black senior leaders and things like that. So there's this grace that we have to begin giving ourselves to actually not talk ourselves out of asking these important questions, and recognize that your questions don't need to arrive at the time that you have read everything, because you will never read everything. And whatever we publish today may not be a reflection of what we think and believe 10 years from now. One of the best advice I got from one of my colleagues, someone I would consider a scholar sister for sure, was, have you ever, there are these researchers I hold up on a pedestal that, like, if they drop something, I'm picking it up and I will just like eat it all up. And they said, did you ever read the first article they published? They had this growth journey that happened. They evolved in how they thought about things, and you really can't expect to compare yourself to where they are now after they've had 20 years of thinking about topics in so many different ways and coming to their own later on. So I know that in this society, it's pretty hard to kind of, appreciate or acknowledge and celebrate the growth of an individual. But I think in reflective practice, sometimes that has made me hesitate oftentimes to ask questions, because I'm like, ooh, I'm not as informed as I would like to be. Should I be asking these questions? But one piece of advice, in addition to reading the first article of your glorified research besties, is to also spend time on asking those questions. So say, has that, talking with other people who may be more experienced along the way, more familiar with your topic, and asking them, here's what I'm thinking about. Do you think it's been done before? Who else can I read? How can I expose myself to different material, different ways of thinking? Take notes. I think in classes, we oftentimes talk about a research journal. And I really did use my research journal, and my first entry was probably trash, but by the time I got to collecting data and trying to make sense of things, I realized what road I wanted to go down into that research study. And I've kept that type of skill along the way in any research activity that I've done, to really think about, all right, if this is where we started, have things changed along the way that make us think that, you know what, maybe this isn't where we're supposed to be. Dr. Edwards and I worked on a research project together, and I remember we were like, all right, as of today, this is, I think, where we're at. And I think we need to acknowledge that research is like that. It provides us an opportunity to really demonstrate growth, and where we are today is not a reflection of where we're going to be years from now. And we need to acknowledge that in each other, to support each other through that journey, and to lift each other up when we have those questions and those doubts that sink in. But also acknowledge that that growth is normal, even though it oftentimes isn't celebrated.
Thank you so much. Go on.
So my advice comes from the student perspective, and I'm so happy I can share that because I didn't have anyone to give me this advice, so I hope it's going to help someone. One of the biggest things, I mentioned it before, time is going to happen. And this was some advice that someone gave me, and I'm just going to give it how I got it. 4 years are going to pass. You could say at the end of those 4 years, you have a PhD, a master's, or a bachelor's, or you can say you've watched, the reruns of Sex and the City multiple times. Use your time wisely. It's nice to go home and not have anything to do, but it's really okay to go home and write a paper. It's okay to go home and read, and just know that that really does build up over time. And that was so crucial to me. That was actually when I went and press submit on all of my applications after someone. It was a peer of mine. It was another student. And when she said that, I was like, you know what? Okay, 4 years are gonna go. I'm gonna grow, and I could just build my knowledge on something. So that was really the biggest piece of advice that I got from anyone. And I tell that to any student or any other person who is thinking about continuing their journey into a terminal degree, is just know that time is going to pass. So just think about how you want to spend it. Something else too is to find balance. I think that's so important, to find balance and have those boundaries, because sometimes we feel like we have to overcompensate. We feel like we have to be that person and we have to meet everyone's needs because there's only a few of us there. You are entitled to those days off just like anybody else. And you are entitled to your full salary at plus more, because you're doing some emotional work. I make that argument all the time in faculty meetings. If I'm teaching a class on race and gender, I'm not teaching anything else that semester. I literally cannot emotionally handle teaching another class because it takes so much out of me just to teach that one, because those topics are very heavy. Students bring so much with them when they come into the classroom. And if you're the only person that they could look at, they're going to feel comfortable telling you that their story, and so is the other student and the other student and the other student, because you're the only one. So create those boundaries, create a routine. If your position allows you to have those research days, take your research day and go to Starbucks, work from home, take advantage of the things that you're afforded, and use those benefits to really, to the best of your abilities, and things that are going to build you up. Because I have learned that not only in school, but also within academia, everyone will suck you dry until there's nothing left. Okay. You could croak and the seat is still hot, and they will replace you with somebody else. And 9 out of 10 times, that person probably isn't even going to look like you. So take care of yourself, because that is so important. And another thing too, that some advice I want to give, I have been fortunate enough to be in a program, although I'm at LSU and it is a PWI, it's probably a white institution. My peers, my cohort, so many of us look like each other. The dean of the School of Education is an African-American man. So having those, being in that type of environment and having that culture there, I don't know how many people are going to say this, but my PhD program has actually been a breeze, aside from my personal difficulties, because my community is there. We all have the same slogan: we are all we got, and we're getting through. So I haven't had struggles being in that environment, even though it is LSU. I'm very comfortable where I'm at. I have a lot of support. But something that I think is so important is whenever you are going to face those challenges, and you're going to have people who may question or criticize your research or your research interests, data speaks volumes. So whatever you have to say, however you feel about it, as long as you have data to support what you say, you're golden, because no one can argue with the data. So it's important to stay well-read, to stay informed, and use all of that knowledge in your day-to-day conversations. Yes, people are going to say what they want to say, but they can't say that you didn't anecdotally pull something out the air and say that this is fact, because you can go back and show proof of what you're saying, why it's relevant, and also just use something to support the conversation that you're having.
This is such a fantastic discussion, and it's stimulating a lot of questions in the chat. I see two questions that I'm going to try to put together. So one is, what is your advice for professionals trying to get experience in research? And then this one is an undergraduate specifically. She's saying, as an undergraduate student looking for research, it can be difficult to find a research lab that correlates to my major at times. Do you think it's important to do research that is more focused, or is doing any type of research okay? So, kind of how do I get it, and do I need to get it in exactly what I want to do, or can I pick it up? Should I pick it up wherever I can get it?
Let's start with this one. I
Mhm.
love this question. As Dr. Edwards already stated, and we have this connection, our background is not in education. It's not where, the journey is not about where you start, it's about where you end. And I love it whenever people can make themselves marketable. So whatever research opportunity comes up, it doesn't have to directly correlate to your specific interests, but gain those skills, gain that knowledge, and gain that opportunity, because you can make anything work for yourself, right? You could take any experience, any skill, and you can make that work for you. And that's really going to work for the program you're applying to, a future employer that you have, because you could say, I'm well-rounded. Not only am I educated in something, I have the foundation to back it up based on this degree that I have, but look at this experience. That also shows too that you have the desire to learn, and you can go in any opportunity, any kind of situation, and really make the most of it, even though it may not be ideal for you. And it's nice because what'll happen is that reputation that you have precedes you. Your name will be in rooms before you even walk into them. And this is a great way to let your network build itself, because this person that you're working with on a research project may say, this student is coming from this background, but they're bringing all of this stuff. And then now you're talking about this interprofessional work group that you've started, and then your network becomes interprofessional. And I love the saying that, you got to have a job to get the next job. You're doing something in research, and you're volunteering, and this is really going to help propel you to something else. And what will happen is you may find that your interest that you have, that you start off with, going back to what Dr. Edwards or Dr. David said about this evolution, your interest may evolve as well, and you may find that you want to venture out into something else. So I don't think you should limit yourself. Take any opportunity that comes across your path, because you never know where it can take you.
I can jump in and speak to the professional question. The person who asked about the, Nikki, please feel free to remind me exactly what the wording of the question.
Sure. Was that the undergrad one? It was basically, how do I get research experience to start with? And
As a
second, do I
professional.
need to do my research in the area that I'm passionate about, or should I pick it up where I can get it?
Yeah, I think Amber did a great job of kind of addressing the undergraduate in terms of getting experience where you can. And I would say from working with undergraduates who are doing research, which is really an exciting opportunity for me as a young faculty member, that is solid advice. And also for the professional, I think if you are currently working and you're just interested in dabbling in research, I think we have to let go of this idea that research only happens if you are sitting in an armchair and thinking and reading all day. That is not where research only happens. Research happens at so many different layers and levels. And I think it starts with connecting to people who bring the expertise or those or the capacity that you know you can't bring to the table right now. So that means that if I know that I don't have the time because I'm working 9 to 5, or I'm working, it's never really 9 to 5, but you know, I'm working more than 40 hours a week because I'm a practitioner, I'm engaged in a lot of activities. During those hours, are there faculty members who are interested and have similar interests that you can connect yourself with, to make those connections and then say, can we go into asking these questions together? Your insight is going to be so valuable to ground the folks who are not in practice, especially within education, every day. I'm definitely a strong promoter for especially student affairs and academic affairs partnerships, but I think it starts with reaching out and expressing interest. Or you have a question during a staff meeting and you're like, is there a faculty member who's answering that? Or is there someone else, not necessarily even a faculty member? Let's think about the assessment and evaluation offices on your campuses, the Friday Institutes, similar to where Dr. Edwards works, who can partner with you to be asking these questions in a systematic way. And what you bring is your lens and your experience and your groundedness into what's happening on a regular basis. So definitely something that you should not strike off your list because it's going to take too much. The relationships are oftentimes right in front of you, and it's just a matter of opening your mouth and saying something.
That's a brilliant suggestion. I love that. Dr. Edwards, were you going to add something?
Very briefly, I mean, my colleagues answered that question so thoroughly, so I just have a small tidbit to add. As a former undergrad who did not participate in research, I learned after the fact there's so many ways you can participate in research. So just a few things that you may already know, but in case you didn't, because I didn't, there are ways. So one could be there's what's called the TRIO program, which is an excellent program. They have the McNair Scholars, which I wish I would have known about that as an undergrad. I mean, look it up, it's amazing. There is almost every university has a undergraduate research office where you can be partnered with a faculty member to do work. You can do independent studies and get college credit. If you're someone like me, I was first generation low income. I did not have time for unpaid anything. So federal work study, I actually started a undergraduate research program at the Friday Institute that is funded through the Federal Work Study Program. So our undergraduate interns get paid to do research because all of us cannot just volunteer. We might need to make money, right? And so there's lots and lots of ways to get involved with research. And just as Dr. Davis says, it doesn't have to look like one way. It doesn't have to be in a office. It doesn't have to be in a lab. But if you have a question or something that you're interested in, figuring out a way to ask that question and to gain data to answer it is basically you're doing research at that point. So that's all I would add to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Another question that we have from the chat is, what is one thing you wish you would have known as an incoming student during your transition to your doctoral program? Oh, I like this. This has stumped you all. Everyone's kind of like
I think I'll hop
looking
in.
up.
Yeah. One thing I wish I would have known. So there's a thing called me search, right? Where you're researching people or populations or experiences that are similar to your own lived experience. And for so long, I think I was like I had been conditioned to believe that research looks one kind of way. I can't study the community that I came from. I can't ask the questions that I really want to know because they aren't rigorous enough. They aren't, important enough. Who's going to fund this research? Who's going to care? But I have since found that the questions that I am super passionate about and that relate to me as a person, my lived experience as a person who grew up low income, grew up first generation, Black woman, et cetera, those questions are fundable. People want to know the answers to them. And they're things that I'm passionate about. Like I kind of have this running joke. And if you follow me on any social media, you'll see I have this hashtag, hashtag I love what I do. Because I really do. I have since fallen in love with research and love the types of things I get to do because they're things that I'm passionate about. I'm not just studying things that other people care about, but I have a personal connection to the topics that I study. And so I guess one thing I wish I would have known is that research is a thing. It's okay to study things that you are passionate about, that you care about, communities that you come from. It's okay to have a racial equity lens to your work. It's okay to choose different types of methods, right? So when you're studying things, there's different ways of knowing. I think a lot of times in at least circles that I've been a part of, quantitative research is deemed as, more rigorous. And while I do appreciate it, I do know how to do it, I have been trained in it, I would more so identify as a qualitative methodologist. And most of my research methods will be more mixed methods approaches. So just to answer that very succinctly, just being open to different ways of knowing and different types of topics and not being so closed off to research has to look this way.
Thank you.
I mentioned this before, and I'll just reiterate this, that I will never have read every single thing I needed to read. And this is not to excuse the amount of things that faculty put on their syllabus for you to read. It's a matter of you will never reach a topic that you are passionate about where you have read everything. And you need to just sit and be okay with that. I kind of spent a lot of time turning my wheels and being really nervous and talking myself out of kind of speaking up in class or saying, or even talking to my advisor about some thoughts I was having, because I'm like, oh, do I have a citation for that? Has anyone said that? And really just wondering, what if I find out that there's this amazing, hole of wonder that I've totally missed, and it has to do with my research question. But the reality is that you're not going to read everything before you arrive. You never arrive at being an expert. It's definitely a journey.
That was awesome, Dr. Davis. I appreciate you saying that because I need to remind myself of that as I am in this dissertation phase, and I'm like, I have to read everything, and it's exhausting. This is something I wish I knew, and I don't really know how to start off by saying this, but sometimes your biggest supporters and someone you could really mentor may not look like you. I don't know how to start it off other than saying it like that, right? When I started this program, because my cohort, my peers, we all look alike, the dean is Black, like, okay, this is great. Have I like walked into a HBCU like school on a white campus? That's what I mean, this is real. That's how it is for me. And I just thought I have to have a Black woman who's going to support me, chair me, just do everything for me. And then once I started to read the literature and experience it for myself in an academic setting, I really saw the importance of having that connection within my network, but not necessarily leaning so heavily on faculty members who are already just stretched so thin. So that was something that was hard for me to accept at first, because I start to look around and then the question is, well, who's going to serve as my mentor? I have found that despite popular opinion, white women have actually served as my biggest supporter and my best mentor throughout my program. and it is because of a white woman. I can say I'm a faculty member and I haven't finished my PhD yet, but I'm on the right track. So I think that as Black researchers, we have to just like remove ourselves from that and say, you know what, it's okay. It's okay. I can form this relationship. And what I have noticed is when you find the right mentor, you can find someone who is passionate about propelling students of color, professionals of color to the next level because of their insight and also because of the information they have. Sometimes they just want to tunnel it all on you. It's just like just a wave of information. It's a tsunami and they are just feeding it and feeding it and feeding it. And that is okay. I did not think that was okay. I don't know why I thought that was okay. I thought I just had to work with someone who looks like me. But again, you can have mentors who serve in that to have someone who serves in that capacity as a mentor to you. They may not look like you, but they can work and serve you in that same capacity as a Black mentor. And I think it's really important to still have those individuals in your network because there's only certain experiences that you may be able to share and understand from a Black perspective that we're not going to get from somebody else. So I think it's important to use that resource when it's necessary, but also just give faculty members of color, their space, acknowledge them and show your appreciation for them. But understand when there's just 2 or 3 in a school, one in a program, it's a lot. It's a lot. And everyone needs to have that moment of breathe and that space to do that, because in the end, the more time that they have for themselves, the better they can serve you in other capacities, I feel.
Nikita, can I jump in?
Please do.
So I noticed that we have a question that I think Amber definitely addressed a bit, and it's about what is the best way to establish this mentor-mentee relationships in the field. So if you don't mind, I want to jump on that because I think it follows up with what Amber shared. In my experience, I envisioned this mentor that we all talk about, that I hear people say, oh, I'm gonna call my mentor on the way home. I'm gonna do my mentor took me out to dinner. We had this life chat. I really struggled because I was like, I can't think of anybody I would call. I can't think of this. And consistently, I always kind of second guess, is it because I'm not good enough? Do I not speak up enough? Just this question of being enough for someone to, seek me out. And it really has been, and I would say, maybe it's a consistent struggle, but I think I've reframed it since then, and really have made a space for having a coalition of people who I can depend on for different things. There are different people I'm going to call for different things, and they're going to show up for me the best way they know how in that slither of the arena that I need their specific help on. And it kind of debunks this myth of having one person you can rely on for everything, or seeking out one person that you want to rely on for everything. And I think, I really would love for more conversations to happen around what does this look like if it's not one person? What happened? There are many times where I call folks my friend tours because they were my friend first, but they are definitely the first person I'm calling about a specific issue. I know that they're going to give me really solid guidance and feedback on, and honest feedback. So really thinking about in establishing that, recognizing that what are the assumptions that you have about what you feel like you want in a mentor, and is it something that can happen or you can get from multiple people, where it's not just coming from one source, that it's that one person you can text and be like, hey, I saw you were connected with this. I'm really interested in it. What does that look like? And that person being like, oh, this is like, this is my love language, my research language. So I could talk to you about that all day. But also relieving the pressure, much like Amber mentioned, relieving the pressure of them having to show up as being everything, right? So just want to leave it with that, because I think it's important to recognize that while there are people who we can rely on for a lot of things, right? But there are also folks who have this coalition of people, and that is as important and integral in your growth as a Black researcher as it is having that one person that you might be able to go to consistently.
I love that response, Dr. Davis. And there's a tangential question that I'll slip in, and Dr. Edwards, I'll give it to you to respond to, and maybe the others can pop in too. But you may have developed an extensive networking list and met great colleagues. How do you keep those networks alive and not fade away?
That is such an excellent question. And my short response to that is I live my life by a couple of principles and values, and one is reciprocity. I am so big on not just taking but giving. And so in the arena of networking lists and having colleagues, I'm the person who's going to send a resource when I say, oh, so and so, this is their research interest. I see an article, I'm going to send it to them, right? Or, oh, this is a great conference opportunity. Let me link up with this person, right? Let me tell them about this. And so thinking about your networking and your colleagues, not just as what you can get from them, but how you can add value to them. And also just a more logistical or practical thing. I'm a scheduler. I legit have like times on my calendar. I'm like, I have not checked in with one of my mentors' names is Trisha. I haven't talked to Trisha in a while. I should probably reach out to her, and we should probably grab lunch. I should probably, when's her birthday? I need to send her a gift. I need to send her a card. I need to, be thoughtful. That's because that's who I am, but also I don't want to always be taking something from someone without also adding value back to their life too. So I think it's a combination of things, but when you kind of approach it from that perspective of reciprocity, I think it becomes a lot easier to make sure that that's a real relationship, and it's not just, oh, I need a recommendation. Can I reach out to so-and-so, right? Because I think we've all been on the opposite side of that, where someone only reaches out for something and then it's not an authentic connection. So that would be my like quick response, because I know we're short on time.
Yes, thank you. I've seen some questions come in on skills, and so that might be our last one. Let's see. But I saw someone ask kind of what are the skills that you need to be successful as a researcher? And just in case it's different, what are the skills that you gain as a researcher? Who wants to grab that first?
So mine isn't a hard skill. I am just a highly sensitive person in general. So a lot of what I do in this program is just about me and my personal growth and loving myself. Because the hard skills, you're going to learn that, and I feel like in the program, but we have to take care of ourselves through this process and beyond. So for me, mine is really just become comfortable with yourself, love yourself, and I think the best skill you can gain is the love of a good routine. I think routines are so important. And I read a research article that mentioned the routine and lifestyle that you create in graduate school is one that is going to really be the foundation of how you live the rest of your life. And I took that to heart. So my biggest thing is, this is not for everyone, but I say wake up. For me at 6 o'clock, I am going to the gym. I'm going to put myself first. I have to do one thing for myself, and at the end of the night, I reflect and I try to just think of one thing I'm grateful for, because again, everything else is going to happen, and you just want to make sure that you're taking care of you, because again, everyone will take from you. And not everyone is as kind as Dr. Edwards is and providing you with things. So make sure you're providing yourself with what you need.
Are there any other skills that Dr. Edwards or Dr. Davis would like to drop in there, or should I give you one last loaded question?
I think you might go ahead and ask us the question. I think Dr. Davis and I dropped it in the chat.
Okay.
Dr. Davis said persistence, and I said be a critical consumer of life. Ask questions.
Fantastic. How do you navigate microaggressions in the workplace or in academic settings?
Now,
Oh, let's
you know
count
you're
the
wrong for giving
ways.
us 5 minutes for this
I
question.
know, I just saw it. I'm so sorry.
Let us count the ways. You know, this let me call on Amber's kind of strategies she just mentioned, right? Taking care of yourself, knowing what fills you is really important, and seeking out opportunities to find out what fills you when you are emptied by these microaggressions. You know, I watched Insecure quite a bit, and I promise I did a great dissertation, but I watched Insecure also. And in watching Insecure, Issa Rae, when she talks in that mirror, sometimes you just gotta have moments like that where it's like that mirror gave you that microaggression, and you say what you want to say it with your chest, and then turn around and say, okay, maybe I can think about ways I can fill my cup, but also address the things that I feel need to be addressed. And yeah, so I think there are different strategies we see, and we shouldn't necessarily push away like one strategy because it seems like, oh, I'm running from the issue or things like that. Whatever feels right to you, I think is what is really important when you're thinking about addressing a microaggression, dealing with the microaggression, bouncing back after a microaggression. But again, I know we've talked about this before, but that's where community and your coalition comes to play, where you're able to vent, get advice from whoever you need to, vent to or get advice from.
I agree with all of that, Dr. Davis. And if I could just add one thing, just to your point about community, just to kind of echo that being so important. I am someone who has intentionally found counter spaces for myself, right? Like found places where I can be in community with folks who have backgrounds like myself, who I can go to and say, am I crazy? Did that just happen? This is what happened. What do you think? Right. Like to have those safe spaces and, just to be open and vulnerable. Dr. Davis is one of those people where I will call her and say, hey, this is what happened. Am I crazy or did that really happen? And I think it's really important to have those sister docs, those counter spaces, those people that you can go to, because it can be very challenging. There's a term called racial battle fatigue, and it's a real thing, right? You can get so exhausted from dealing with the consistent, they say they're small microaggressions, but I would argue they can be very large and can really impact your mental well-being, your health, etc. So finding those soft spaces where you can land and you can unravel in a safe environment.
Thanks, Dr. Edwards. I'm glad you said that. I've noticed the common thread, you all have said it many times, of like community, and you're highlighting that. I almost feel like I hear you saying if you don't have one, you need to go look for one because you need to be around like-minded people. Go
And
on, Miss Brown.
It can be outside of school too. So think about that support outside of school, because life is still happening, and that your community can consist of people who are close to you. And I love that Dr. Edwards talked about racial battle fatigue. I wanted to hit a microaggression on the head. I'm just in a space that allows me to do that, and I have that support to do it. So for me, I like to just call it out because I do so much research on racial battle fatigue, and it's interesting, Dr. Davis. That was my person. That's my person who I read on, and I know everything about him. But yeah, I don't want to be fatigued. Too many things happen, and as a public health professional, I'm cutting this super short. Stress is real. Stress kills. I don't want to deal with that. So I like to nip it in the bud and move on with my life. To not be fatigued, but be well rested.
Well, thank you all for such amazing answers. I feel like I've learned so much. I'm glad that we were able to get everyone's questions answered as well.